The first thing you should know is that the FBI has divisions that don't officially exist. Buried deep in redacted files and unlisted budgets is a small, nameless branch dedicated to investigating what most people would call impossible. Ghosts, monsters, demons. None of those are the official terms, of course. The Bureau prefers words like phenomenon, manifestation, and anomalous entity. My badge has a standard serial number, and my title is as ordinary as they come, Special Agent. But the cases I handle are anything but. This story begins with a call I got on a rainy Thursday night in early October, a call that would change everything I thought I knew about the world. I was alone in my apartment, halfway through a bottle of whiskey I told myself I didn't need, when my encrypted phone lit up. No caller ID, just a string of numbers that meant it was from headquarters. My stomach knotted the way it always did when the division reached out after dark. "Agent Carter," a voice said. It was clipped, cold, and distinctly female. "You're being assigned to a priority case. Larkspur Road, house number 91. A local precinct responded to a 911 call about unusual activity. 2 officers have gone missing. You're being sent in alone." The line went dead. I didn't ask questions. You don't, not in this job. You pack your gear, sidearm, flashlight, recorder, and a few unorthodox tools I wasn't supposed to admit existed, and you go. The rain hadn't stopped by the time I pulled up to the address. The house sat at the end of a narrow suburban street, its silhouette stark against a restless sky. It wasn't abandoned. There were still curtains in the windows and a mailbox leaning on its post, but it looked wrong, like something that had been lived in but not loved for a very long time. The paint was peeling in long strips, the porch sagged, and every window was dark, though I could feel eyes behind them. 2 squad cars were parked at awkward angles in the driveway, their lights off but engines running. The driver's side doors hung open, and rain pooled in the seats. That wasn't a good sign. I parked behind them and sat for a moment, letting the engine idle. My gut churned with a mixture of dread and adrenaline. I'd worked cases before, people torn apart in ways that didn't make sense, entire rooms that went cold enough to freeze water, but this house, it felt alive. The kind of alive that watches, waits, and hungers. I finally forced myself out of the car, the rain soaking through my coat in seconds. I called out, "FBI. Anyone here?" My voice was swallowed by the storm. No response. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and something sweeter, like rotting fruit. I flicked on my flashlight and swept it across the living room. The place was cluttered but not abandoned, magazines stacked on a coffee table, toys on the floor, dishes in the sink. A family had lived here, recently. The thought made my skin crawl. Then I saw the first sign of trouble. A black smear stained the wall near the hallway, stretching from the floor up to the ceiling like a shadow burned into the plaster. The edges were uneven, tendrils of darkness reaching outward, and when I leaned closer, I realized it wasn't just a stain. It pulsed, faintly, like a heartbeat. I took a step back and touched the comm in my ear. "This is Agent Carter. I'm inside. Found something." Static answered me. No voice, no acknowledgement. Great. I moved carefully down the hallway, every nerve on edge. The deeper I went, the colder it became, like walking into a freezer. My breath fogged in the beam of my flashlight. That's when I found the first officer. He was sitting against the wall, legs stretched out, head slumped forward. At first, I thought he was dead. His skin was pale, lips blue. But when I crouched down, I realized his eyes were open. Wide open. Staring. "Officer!" I whispered. He didn't blink. His pupils were blown wide, and his expression was frozen in a look of pure, animal terror. There was no blood, no visible injury. Just fear. I touched his neck. No pulse. Then something strange happened. His mouth opened slightly, like he was about to speak. I froze, heart hammering. "Go," he rasped. The voice was barely a whisper, the sound of dry leaves rustling. "Go back." I stumbled back, my hand instinctively reaching for my gun. His body sagged, lifeless again, as though whatever had animated him had vanished. That was when I heard it, footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth. I raised my weapon and aimed it at the staircase. FBI. I barked. Show yourself. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside. I could feel the house breathing around me, the floorboards creaking softly under some unseen weight. I crept up the stairs, gun raised, flashlight sweeping each step. Halfway up, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow tall and thin, slipping around the corner at the end of the hallway. Stop! I shouted, but my voice cracked. I reached the top and swung my light left and right. The hallway was lined with doors, most of them closed. The shadow had gone into the last room at the end. I approached slowly, every muscle tight. The door was ajar. I nudged it open with my foot and stepped inside. It was a child's bedroom. The wallpaper was peeling, the furniture old but neatly arranged. A rocking horse sat in one corner, swaying gently even though there was no draft. My flashlight beam fell on a small bed with pink sheets. They were stained dark with something I didn't want to identify. And then I saw the second officer. He was hanging from the ceiling by his wrists, his body contorted unnaturally, head tilted at a sickening angle. His mouth was stretched open in a silent scream, and his eyes were gone. Two gaping black holes stared back at me. I felt bile rise in my throat. Something moved in the darkness behind him. I swung the flashlight, but there was nothing there. Just shadows clinging to the corners of the room, thicker than they should be. I took a step forward, and the temperature dropped again. That's when I heard it. A laugh. It was soft, high-pitched, and wrong. It sounded like a child's giggle, but there was no joy in it. It came from everywhere at once, echoing through the walls. I backed toward the door, gun trembling in my hand. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch toward me, writhing along the floor and ceiling like living things. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice cracking. The laugh stopped. A whisper replaced it, low and guttural. "Leave, or stay forever." I bolted. I don't remember running down the hallway, only that the house seemed to twist and shift around me. The staircase was farther than I remembered, the walls narrowing as I ran. Doors slammed shut behind me, one after another, until I finally stumbled into the living room. The black stain on the wall had spread. It covered nearly the entire surface now, a swirling void that pulsed like a living heart. The smell of rot was stronger, clinging to the back of my throat. Something moved inside the stain. I froze, staring as a hand, long, skeletal fingers tipped with claws, pressed against the surface. The wall rippled like water. I raised my gun and fired. The shot echoed like a thunderclap, but the bullet passed through the wall as if it wasn't there. The hand slid back, vanishing into the blackness, and the stain pulsed faster, like it was excited. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran for the door, but when I grabbed the handle, it wouldn't budge. I yanked, kicked, slammed my shoulder against it. Nothing. It was like the house had locked me in. That's when the whisper came again, right behind me. "Stay." I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Something stood in the hallway. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs too long for its body. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and its face, there was no face. Just smooth, pale skin. It took a step toward me, its movements jerky and insect-like. I emptied my clip into it. The bullets didn't slow it down. The thing lunged, and I dove out of the way, crashing into a coffee table. Pain shot through my side, but I scrambled to my feet and sprinted toward the kitchen. There had to be another way out. I found a back door and grabbed the handle. It opened easily, swinging wide. Relief flooded me, until I realized the world outside wasn't there. Instead of rain and darkness, the door opened into a void. A swirling mass of black and red clouds stretched as far as I could see. The ground was gone. The street, the cars, the neighborhood, all of it had vanished. Behind me, the creature screeched. I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it, my mind racing. I was trapped in something that wasn't a house anymore. This place was alive, a predator, and I was its prey. And then, clear as day, I heard a child's voice whisper in my ear. "Don't let it catch you." I froze at the voice, my back pressed against the cold wood of the door, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Silence. The flashlight beam shook in my hand as I swept it across the kitchen. Cabinets with peeling paint lined the walls, their doors slightly ajar. A rusted sink sat beneath a cracked window, and water dripped from a faucet that hadn't been turned on in years. The smell of mildew clung to the air. But there was no one here. The voice had been a child's, soft and close, as if someone had leaned in right behind me. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. In this line of work, hearing voices wasn't new. But they weren't supposed to sound real. This wasn't a recording or an echo, it was a living voice. "Don't let it catch you," it had said. The words gnawed at me. I flicked off my flashlight, plunging the kitchen into darkness, and waited. My breathing slowed, and I strained to listen. The storm outside was gone. No thunder, no rain. Just nothing. And then I heard it, the sound of something moving in the hallway behind me. Slow, dragging footsteps, accompanied by a faint scraping noise, like nails scratching against the wall. I flicked the light back on. The hallway was empty. The entity was playing with me. I moved quickly, scanning for anything I could use as a weapon. Bullets hadn't worked. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't bound by the same rules as the rest of us. I spotted a butcher's knife on the counter and grabbed it, though it felt laughably inadequate against something that could bend reality. I edged toward the hallway, weapon raised. The air felt heavy, oppressive, pressing down on me like deep ocean water. Every step I took creaked loudly, as if the house wanted me to know I wasn't alone. The stain on the wall in the living room was bigger now. It had spread to the ceiling, pulsating like a massive, living organ. The skeletal hand that had emerged from it earlier was gone, but I could feel something watching me from inside. And then I saw it, movement at the edge of my vision. A shadow darted across the hallway, quick as lightning. "Show yourself," I barked, voice shaking. Nothing. The kitchen door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, knife raised, but the door was just closed. I tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. I was being herded. A whisper echoed through the hallway. "Upstairs." I froze. The voice was a child's again. Faint. Fragile. I turned toward the staircase, its shadowed outline barely visible at the end of the hallway. Something about that voice. It wasn't like the other whisper. The first one, the guttural stay, had been filled with malice, like it had crawled up from a grave. This one was different. There was fear in it. Urgency. I hesitated, torn between instinct and logic. Normally, I'd never follow a disembodied voice in a haunted house, but I didn't have many options. I gripped the knife tighter and started up the stairs. Every step groaned under my weight. The air grew colder, and the smell of rot thickened. Shadows clung to the corners of the hallway like oil. When I reached the top, I realized the layout had changed. The hallway was longer now, stretching impossibly far in both directions. Doors lined the walls, all identical, all closed. The wallpaper was peeling away in strips, revealing blackened wood beneath. "This isn't real," I whispered to myself. The house was alive. It was twisting itself, rearranging its insides, like a predator adjusting its trap. I picked a direction and started walking, counting the doors as I passed them. 1, 2, 3, 4. The hallway went on and on, far longer than the dimensions of the house could allow. I glanced back. The staircase was gone. My chest tightened. Panic clawed at me, but I forced it down. Losing control in a place like this would get me killed, or worse. The child's voice came again, clearer this time, "Left." I stopped. There was a door on my left, identical to the others. I hesitated, then turned the knob. It opened easily. The room beyond was small and dimly lit, illuminated by a single flickering lamp on a dresser. The walls were lined with children's drawings, crude crayon sketches of stick figures, houses, and something darker. One drawing showed a tall, faceless figure with long arms, towering over a small girl. Another depicted a black void swallowing a house whole. A chill ran down my spine. In the center of the room was a bed. Sitting on it was a girl. She couldn't have been older than 6 or 7, with long, tangled hair and pale skin. She wore a simple nightgown, stained and torn. Her wide, dark eyes locked on mine as I stepped inside. "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. She didn't answer. I crouched down, trying to seem less threatening. "My name is Carter. I'm here to help you. Are you hurt?" She shook her head slowly. "What's your name?" Her lips parted. "Emily." The name sent a jolt through me. I'd read it in the case file. Emily Parker. 7 years old. Reported missing 2 weeks ago. Her parents claimed she vanished from her bedroom in the middle of the night. I took a careful step closer. "Emily, do you know what's happening here?" She looked down at her hands, clutching something tightly. A stuffed rabbit, worn and dirty. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I'm here to get you out." She shook her head. "You can't leave. Nobody leaves." My stomach sank. "What do you mean?" Her eyes darted to the door. "It's coming." The light flickered, then went out, plunging the room into darkness. I turned, flashlight beam cutting through the black. The door was gone. In its place was a solid wall. A deep, guttural growl filled the air, vibrating through the floorboards. Emily whimpered and scrambled under the bed. "Stay there," I hissed, positioning myself between her and the sound. The sensation of passing through that wall was like being submerged in ice-cold water while having your stomach turned inside out. 1 second I was clutching Emily to my chest, the next we were tumbling forward, gasping for breath, our bodies slick with something that wasn't quite liquid. We landed hard. I staggered to my feet, coughing, and set Emily down. My flashlight flickered weakly, casting a pale glow over the space around us. My first thought was that we hadn't escaped the house. My second thought was that this was the real house. The walls around us weren't wood and plaster anymore. They were wet, pulsating, alive. Fleshy ridges ran along the seams of the ceiling, and the floor beneath our feet was soft, like walking on muscle. A low, steady hum vibrated through the walls, as though we were standing inside a massive, slumbering beast. Emily clung to my leg, trembling. Where are we?" I asked softly. She shook her head, tears streaking her face. "It's here. We're inside it." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Inside it. I'd been in haunted houses before. Places with restless spirits, poltergeists, even demons. But this wasn't a haunting. This wasn't a building possessed by something malevolent. This was the thing. The entire house was alive. A distant scraping sound echoed through the corridor ahead of us. I raised my flashlight, scanning our surroundings. The hallway stretched far into darkness, lined with what looked like doorways, but instead of wood, they were membranous flaps, like torn skin. Something shifted behind one of them, and I quickly looked away. "We have to keep moving," I whispered. Emily nodded, gripping her stuffed rabbit tighter. We started walking, our footsteps muffled by the spongy floor. The air was thick and humid, carrying a faint metallic smell, like blood. I kept my flashlight trained ahead, but every so often I caught movement in the corners of my vision. Shadows slithering along the walls, pale shapes darting between doorways. The hum in the walls grew louder, more rhythmic. It wasn't a hum, it was a heartbeat. Slow. Steady. The house was awake. We rounded a corner and found ourselves in what might have been a living room in another life. Here, it was a cavernous chamber with walls that pulsed like lungs. Furniture was embedded in the flesh-like material, half swallowed, chairs, tables, even a rocking horse, all twisted and warped. Emily tugged at my sleeve. "It doesn't like us here." "I know," I murmured. "We won't stay." We moved quickly across the room, but I froze when I saw something on the far wall. A door. A real door. Wooden, with a brass handle. It looked out of place, pristine, untouched by whatever had corrupted this place. Hope flickered in my chest. "That's it," I whispered. Emily didn't move. "What's wrong?" She shook her head. "It's a trick." I glanced at the door again. She could be right. The thing controlling this house was intelligent. It had been toying with me since I stepped inside. Still, it was the only lead we had. "Stay behind me," I said, approaching cautiously. The closer we got, the more wrong it felt. The air grew colder, and the heartbeat in the walls quickened. My hand hovered over the doorknob, and I felt a vibration coming from it, like something was breathing on the other side. I turned it slowly. The door swung open, revealing not an exit but another hallway, this one perfectly normal. White walls, carpeted floor, framed photographs. It looked like any suburban home in America. I stepped through cautiously, Emily clutching my arm. The second we crossed the threshold, the atmosphere changed. The oppressive humidity was gone, replaced by a sterile stillness. The walls here were spotless, the air smelled faintly of lavender. It was comforting. Too comforting. Emily buried her face in my coat. "I don't like it here." "Neither do I murmured. We walked down the hallway. The photographs lining the walls caught my attention. At first, they were normal family portraits, a man, a woman, a little girl. Smiling faces. But as we moved further down, the images changed. The smiles faded. The parents looked tired, haggard. In the next picture, their eyes were hollow. In the one after that, their mouths were sewn shut. I stopped, staring at the last photograph. It was of Emily. She was sitting on a bed, clutching her rabbit, tears streaming down her face. The date on the frame was 2 days from now. My stomach churned. Emily tugged at my sleeve. "It's watching us." A chill ran down my spine. "Where?" She pointed to the ceiling. I tilted my flashlight upward. Dozens of eyes stared back at me, embedded in the ceiling, unblinking. A loud screech echoed through the hallway, followed by the sound of rushing footsteps. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Emily's hand. We sprinted down the hallway as the eyes blinked in unison, and the walls began to close in. The carpet curled upward, twisting into fleshy tendrils that reached for our legs. We dodged and weaved, barely staying ahead of them. At the end of the hallway was another door. I slammed into it shoulder first, and it burst open. We stumbled into a massive room that looked like a cathedral. The ceiling arched high above us, and the walls were lined with pulsing veins. In the center of the room was a pit, and from it came a deep, resonant sound, a heartbeat loud and steady. I approached the edge of the pit and shone my light inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. Bodies. Hundreds of them. They were suspended in some kind of translucent fluid, their eyes open, mouths slack. Some were decomposed, others looked perfectly preserved. I recognized police uniforms among them, and even a few FBI jackets. Agents like me. "This is where it takes them," I whispered. Emily clung to my side. "It feeds." I swallowed hard. "On what?" She didn't answer. I turned away from the pit and scanned the room. At the far end was another door, this one massive and reinforced with iron. Strange symbols were etched into it, symbols I recognized from old case files, sigils used to ward off demons and spirits. Hope sparked again. Maybe someone had tried to contain this thing before. Maybe that door was an exit. "Come on," I said, taking Emily's hand. We made our way across the room, the sound of the heartbeat growing louder with every step. My instincts screamed that we were being watched. Halfway to the door, I heard it. A wet, slithering sound behind us. I spun around. The creature emerged from the pit. It was larger now, its limbs impossibly long, its faceless head tilting as it climbed out of the fluid. Its body was covered in eyes, all of them blinking independently, and its mouth, if you could call it that, was a gaping hole lined with jagged teeth. It let out a roar that shook the entire chamber. I grabbed Emily and ran. The door wasn't far, but the creature moved fast, its limbs stretching unnaturally as it crawled after us. "Faster!" I shouted. Emily stumbled, and I scooped her up, sprinting the last few feet. I reached the door and grabbed the handle. It wouldn't budge. "No, no, no." I slammed my shoulder into it, but it didn't move. The creature was almost on us. I turned, knife in hand, ready to fight, even if it was useless. Then Emily screamed, "The symbols! Touch the symbols!" I looked at her, confused. "The symbols," she repeated, pointing to the markings on the door. I pressed my hand against one of the sigils. The symbol glowed faintly, and the door creaked open an inch. The creature screeched, recoiling slightly. "Do it again!" Emily cried. I pressed another symbol. It glowed brighter, and the door opened wider. The creature lunged, its claws slashing through the air where I'd been standing a moment before. I ducked and pressed the third symbol. The door swung open. "Go!" I shouted, shoving Emily through. We stumbled into darkness, the sound of the creature's screech echoing behind us as the door slammed shut. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the lights flickered on. We were standing in a narrow corridor lined with bookshelves. The air was dry and smelled of old paper and ink. Candles flickered in sconces along the walls. "This isn't the house anymore," I whispered. Emily clutched her rabbit. "Where are we?" I looked around, my heart still pounding. "I think," I said slowly, "we're in whatever was used to keep that thing locked up." We started walking, the sound of our footsteps echoing softly in the corridor. The bookshelves were filled with ancient tomes, some bound in leather, others in materials I didn't recognize. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, glowing faintly. As we moved deeper into the corridor, I realized something. This wasn't a prison for the creature. It was a library. And whatever was in these books, it was written for people like me. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, lined with towering bookshelves that disappeared into shadow. Emily clung to my coat as we walked, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. The air was cool, dry, and heavy with the scent of ancient paper and ink, a stark contrast to the suffocating humidity of the creature's domain. "Where do you think this goes?" Emily whispered. I shook my head. "Somewhere safer, I hope." My flashlight flickered, and I switched it off. The candles embedded in the walls provided enough light, their flames casting long, dancing shadows. The silence here was unsettling, but after the chaos of the house, it felt almost peaceful. Too peaceful. I'd been in places like this before, hidden sanctuaries, old archives, underground vaults guarded by sigils and wards. In my line of work, these weren't libraries. They were fortresses of knowledge, built by those who had seen the unexplainable and survived long enough to write about it. We turned a corner and found ourselves in a massive circular chamber. The ceiling arched high above us, and the floor was patterned with intricate sigils glowing faintly blue. Shelves curved along the walls, filled with tomes, scrolls, and artifacts that hummed with a faint energy. In the center of the room sat a desk, and at the desk sat a man. He was ancient, with pale skin stretched thin over sharp cheekbones, his eyes sunken but piercingly bright. He wore a tattered black robe, and his skeletal hands were folded over an open book. He didn't look up when we entered. "Emily," I murmured, "stay close." She nodded, pressing against my leg. I approached cautiously, hand hovering near my holstered sidearm. "Who are you?" I asked. The man spoke without looking at me, his voice dry and brittle, like crumbling paper. "A librarian." "Of what?" "Of this place," he said simply, finally lifting his gaze. His eyes were an unnatural shade of gray, like storm clouds before a tornado. "You are in the archive." I glanced around. "This is part of the house." He shook his head slowly. "No. This is beneath it. Outside it. Call it a sanctuary, if you like. Though," his eyes flicked to Emily, "sanctuary is a relative term." Emily tightened her grip on my coat. "I need answers," I said firmly. "What is that thing?" The librarian's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He gestured to the bookshelves. "Its name has been lost to time. Some call it the Hollow One. Others, the Maw. But names do not contain it, Agent Carter." I froze. "How do you know my name?" A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Because you are not the first. Your division has sent others, though they never returned." That sent a shiver down my spine. I thought of the bodies I'd seen floating in that pit, agents just like me. "Then tell me how to kill it," I demanded. The librarian chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "You do not kill hunger, Agent Carter. You starve it. Or you feed it something it cannot consume." "Like what?" His smile faded. "Knowledge." Emily whimpered softly. "I don't like him," she whispered. I crouched to her level. "It's okay, Emily. He's helping us." She shook her head. "No, he's not." I turned back to the librarian, uneasy. "What do you mean by knowledge?" He gestured to the books around him. This creature is older than memory. It is not bound by time, by space, or by the laws of your world. It consumes lives, memories, and realities. It is a parasite that wears a house like a shell. But it was bound once. Bound. He nodded. The sigils you touched. The door you passed through. Long ago, those symbols were carved by those who understood its nature. They created this archive as both a sanctuary and a prison. But prisons decay. Sigils fade. And hunger endures. My mind raced. So that thing escaped its prison? Or the prison failed, he said. It matters little. What matters is that you are now marked. Marked. He pointed at my chest. I glanced down and saw faint black lines crawling beneath my shirt, snaking out from my sternum like veins. I yanked the collar aside and swore under my breath. The markings glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the house's heartbeat. It has tasted you, the librarian said. You are bound to it now. You cannot leave this place as you are. Emily squeezed my arm, her eyes wide. Is he saying you're stuck here? I forced a smile. We'll figure it out. The librarian rose slowly from his chair, moving with unsettling grace for someone so frail-looking. He walked to a nearby shelf and pulled down a massive book, its cover bound in cracked leather. He laid it on the desk and opened it, revealing pages filled with dense, handwritten text and intricate diagrams. This, he said, tapping a sigil drawn in black ink, is the seal of severance. It is the only thing that can cut your connection to the maw. But the ritual is dangerous. Few survive it. I'll take dangerous over dead. He raised an eyebrow. You misunderstand. Death would be a mercy. If the ritual fails, you will not die. You will become part of it. The chamber convulsed as if alive, the pulsating walls shuddering with each thunderous beat of the monstrous heart embedded in the floor. Emily clutched her stuffed rabbit and crouched low inside the glowing sigil, her small frame shaking violently. The creature loomed above us, its body an impossible amalgamation of limbs, sinew, and gnashing mouths whispering promises of eternity. Stay. The word was not a sound but a vibration, a force that rattled my bones and clawed at my mind. My vision blurred, and for a moment I saw flashes of other people, faces screaming, eyes wide with terror, swallowed whole and screaming still from inside the walls of this house. Carter! Emily cried, snapping me back. I gripped the knife tighter. You're not taking her, I hissed. The sigil beneath Emily and me burned bright red, glowing so intensely it cast wild shadows across the chamber. The creature recoiled slightly, letting out a guttural roar that shook the very ground. I realized the blood-charged symbol wasn't just a ritual, it was a weapon. The hollow one lashed out, one of its slick, sinewy appendages whipping toward us with impossible speed. I barely rolled away in time, the impact cracking stone where I'd been standing. A spray of wet, black ichor hissed as it splattered the ground. Stay in the circle, I yelled to Emily. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and huddled deeper inside the glowing sigil. The thing lunged again, but this time I was ready. I raised my knife and slashed through the limb as it came down, the blade glowing faintly as it cut through corrupted flesh. The creature howled, a bone-rattling screech that echoed through my skull. The walls began to move. No, not just move, they breathed. Veins and tendrils writhed like snakes, slithering across the chamber, closing in on us. The air grew thick with heat and the coppery scent of blood. Carter! Emily screamed again, pointing behind me. I spun just in time to see a tendril the size of a tree trunk slam toward me. I dove aside, rolling across the slick, fleshy floor, and scrambled to my feet. My heart pounded in rhythm with the creature's monstrous heartbeat, and for a moment I felt it pulling at me. I saw my own memories flashing before my eyes. My first case with the division, my father's funeral, the last time I laughed. The house wanted all of it. I bit down hard on my lip until I tasted blood, grounding myself in the pain. Not today, I growled. The librarian's warning echoed in my mind. If you fail, you will feed it. I wasn't planning on becoming dinner. The sigil glowed brighter as Emily clutched her rabbit tighter, whispering something under her breath, a prayer, maybe, or a song. The creature seemed to flinch at the sound, its massive mouths chattering in unison, 1,000 distorted voices hissing, "Silence!" I seized the moment. With my free hand, I pulled a flare from my vest, struck it, and tossed it into the heart embedded in the floor. The chamber erupted in blinding red light, and the hollow one roared, recoiling violently as smoke filled the air. The smell of burning flesh filled my nostrils. "Carter!" Emily shrieked. "Behind you!" I spun around just in time to see another tendril lash out. It struck me square in the chest, sending me flying across the chamber. I slammed into the wall with a sickening crunch, the air knocked from my lungs. My vision swam, and for a moment, everything went dark. When I came to, the creature was closing in on Emily. She stood frozen in the glowing circle, clutching her rabbit like a lifeline. "No!" I rasped, dragging myself to my feet. Pain lanced through my ribs, but adrenaline kept me moving. The sigil was still glowing, brighter than ever, its light searing against the creature's shadowy mass. I realized then that it wasn't enough to simply stand in the circle. The sigil wasn't a shield, it was a doorway. "Emily!" I shouted, staggering forward. "Put your hand on the center of the circle." She hesitated, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. "No." She obeyed, pressing her tiny, blood-streaked palm against the spiral at the heart of the sigil. The glow intensified, burning so bright it hurt to look at. The air vibrated with a low hum, and the creature howled in rage. "No!" it bellowed, thrashing violently. The walls convulsed, and tendrils lashed out wildly, smashing stone and sending debris flying. I ducked and weaved, diving for the center of the circle. I landed beside Emily, blood dripping from my nose, and grabbed her other hand. We were both in the center now. The sigil pulsed beneath us like a living thing, and the hum grew louder, resonating deep in my bones. The hollow one recoiled, writhing in agony. The mouths on its body screamed in a chorus of anguish, and I realized we were hurting it. The librarian's words came back to me, "You starve it, or you feed it something it cannot consume." Knowledge. It wasn't just a ritual. This was a battle of wills. I closed my eyes and thought of everything I knew. Every memory. Every case. Every scrap of information I'd ever gathered. I forced it all outward, pushing it through my mind and into the sigil. The air around us crackled with energy, and the creature screamed louder, thrashing violently. It felt like my skull was splitting open, but I kept going. Emily's grip tightened on my hand, and I felt her mind joining mine. Her memories of her parents, of playing with her rabbit, of running through the house before it turned into a nightmare. We were feeding it. But it couldn't consume this. The hollow one let out a final, deafening roar, and the chamber erupted in blinding white light. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then I opened my eyes. We were lying on the floor of the house's foyer. The walls were normal, peeling wallpaper, old wooden stairs, broken furniture. No pulsing veins, no shadows that moved on their own. The oppressive atmosphere was gone. Emily stirred beside me. "Carter," she whispered. I sat up, wincing at the pain in my ribs. "It's over," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. We got to our feet and stumbled outside. The sun was rising, casting a soft golden light over the overgrown yard. For the first time in what felt like days, I could breathe. Emily clutched my hand tightly as we walked toward my car. "Is it gone?" she asked softly. I looked back at the house. It stood silent and still, no longer alive, but something in the back of my mind told me it wasn't over. "For now," I said. We drove in silence for a long time. Emily eventually fell asleep in the back seat, her rabbit still clutched tightly in her arms. I glanced at the rearview mirror, and for a moment, I swore I saw movement in the reflection of the house, even though it was miles behind us. A flicker of shadow. A whisper of a shape. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Back at headquarters, they would ask for a report. They'd want details, evidence, proof. But some things can't be documented, can't be understood. Some things just watch. And wait. That night, as I tried to sleep, I dreamed of the sigil glowing beneath us, of the creature's 1,000 eyes, and of a voice whispering softly in the dark. "You will come back." I woke with a start, heart racing. In the dim light of my bedroom, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. For just a split second, I saw black veins pulsing faintly beneath my skin.